That's
okay. Welcome everyone, and hello again to our 21st iteration of version of the Coffee Chat. And today we want to continue securing our Kubernetes cluster. Last week we have been learning about Kyverno and policies and all the interesting magic stuff. And for this week we said we want to continue finishing up OpenID and look a bit into Kiosk, whatever that may be. But I'm handing over to Niklas, sharing the latest and greatest. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So let me share my screen. I need to check something. Okay. Yeah, we are today coming back to the view. So it's my dashboard from the old one, so because I'm a little bit lazy. Yeah, so we're number 21, and what we want to recap. So I think 2 weeks ago or 2 coffees ago, we talked a little bit about authentication and authorization in Kubernetes, and afterwards, Philip gave an awesome introduction about more security to the authorization part and also shown a little bit about Kyverno. But right now, what we want to do again is to fix our problem from last time with the OpenID. So what we want going to use is we want to instruct our Kubernetes cluster. We want to instruct our API server, so it should be K8s. I can fix it right now. It should be K3s. So we want to instruct our API server that he will call to Gitlab as identity provider. And for that, we're using a proxy that is called DEX. And when we are looking into DEX, it's like, probably you ask, why do we need this? It's a little bit easier to set up, and the other benefit of integrating DEX instead of directly Gitlab is that we have a federated OpenID Connect provider. What does this mean? So when we are looking a bit in the documentation, you can see that DEX supports multiple connectors. So that means that we could use DEX as single instance for identities, and he can connect in parallel to GitHub, GitLab, probably Google, and all the other stuff right around. Or probably also to your own custom integration. This is also possible. So for that, because it's mostly what I used in my career was mostly DEX to do the authentication part, we will continue this part. So for that, like a good chef, I prepared something for that we don't need to invest all the time on setting up DEX and so on. I will show you how I did this and explain a little bit how does it works. So luckily, we moved a little bit away from that strategy right now. So that means that we don't run DEX into the Kubernetes cluster. Why? Because it's more like then we need to handle a chicken egg problem, and I think it's not so intuitive for understanding the old concepts. So my take on this was right now that I created, hopefully it works. Oh, wait. I created a separate instance, and before the command, I moved DEX onto that command. So it's like, so that it's more clear that, for example, it could be our identity server, more like IDP server, and our Kubernetes or K3s API will talk to the DEX instance. And we're using, of course, HTTPS, because when you remember on the last call, we tried to set it up without HTTPS, and then the Kube API server said, okay, it's not cool to do that. Yeah, so first of all, let's look a little bit into DEX, and then we are looking back into our final stuff on K3s. Okay. So now I will switch into the terminal. I hope you can see everything. I need to check the, yeah, it's good. So instead of installing, you have multiple ways to install DEX. So there's a binary, you can install it with systemd, you can install it with in Kubernetes, or you can also use it like in a simple way that I try to use is mostly that I install it with Docker. So for that, I spinned up on this instance a DEX server with the latest version. The traffic will take place for doing all the routing and the TLS termination. And yeah, that's it. Mostly the WHOMI is for testing purposes, right? Nothing special. So we could check first. I think I have two repositories. Yeah, I have there the DEX directory. And now when we check this, so I have a little simple Docker Compose file for our DEX server. What does it mean? It's like, first we're having the image, then we're configuring here the, I can also set numbers, it's more intuitive. So that we are setting here the commands that we want to use this config YAML or custom, and probably mounting out the configs and the data. Yeah. Mostly what's interesting on traffic is that we are using labels for documenting all our proxy configuration. That means that we say here traffic is enabled, and that we determine which host we want to use and which endpoint and probably which DNS challenge and so on. Yeah. So for a better overview, what does it mean? We can go back. And I hope so. Yeah, cool. This is the web UI of traffic. So first of all, you can see that we have three concepts in terms of that we have router and services. We are HTTP based so that we can check which current applications are currently running here. And you can see that we're having the DEX HTTP router and goes to the DEX service, and our DEX service is our final container in the end. So when we are looking on TCP, no, was it? It's HTTP. Okay, so change it. So that we can see here is now the final container, and it will be reached when we, for example, when we now get into DEX. First of all, when we're checking, you would see something, nothing special here. It would say page not found. But if you want to check if DEX is working correctly, as your assumption, there's a properly well-known path. So well-known OpenID configuration. This comes from the standard of OpenID. So OpenID is our authentication protocol that we are going to use. And this is the reason why you can check how the configuration for that endpoint is made. Yeah, that will be also later needed for configuring stuff. So now let's look back into the instance and let's check a little bit on the config YAML of DEX. So in DEX, we have multiple options. So you can have multiple storage backends because we're having not so many high traffic and we don't need to manage 1,000 millions of users. So I decided I can go with a simple SQLite database and search on the file system. It's fine mostly for our stuff. Afterwards, we'll move into Vim because it's easier to read. Yeah. Cool. So afterwards, we can configure here the HTTP configuration. It's mostly like that we can configure it. You can also directly terminate SSL on DEX, but my way is to decide to do that on traffic. Yeah. Mostly what you probably like to know, or what you want to use, is that you want to know which is the issuer. The issuer is the instance that currently gives us the authentication information from us. So it's the main reason why you can also see here the issuer is the same value that you defined in the config YAML. So it's like the endpoint, and these are the standard endpoints that will be used for DEX. So mostly beside all that, we have here the times how long the tokens are valid and when they expired. Afterwards, we can define the OAuth2 configuration because OpenID stacks up on OAuth2 protocol, so it's more a thin layer on it, and it's a smaller protocol instead of the IO of 2. That's the reason why I failed. So mostly now coming to the interesting point. So right now what we now configured here is index is the GitLab instance. So that means we can say, okay, our GitLab IDP goes to gitlab.com. So that means when we are looking back into the API server, so that means Dex knows that he needs to connect to GitLab IDP, and this in terms of is gitlab.com. So probably you can also specify your own GitLab instance. It's fine, mostly for that reason. When we are looking back, we have here client secret and client ID. Probably you're asking from what does it come from, and that's the most important step that you need to do on GitLab side when we are looking onto GitLab. And now I need to move my window a little bit. Oh wait, not gonna. Okay, so it's a little bit more better. So you can configure it under settings and then applications, and it takes some time. Okay, cool. What? Yeah, cool. Yeah, and when you want to configure the stuff, it's like when we want to create a new Dex instance, it would be like Dex testing, and then we need to have a valid redirect URL. So that means like when the flow comes into that, so when we are looking a little bit back into the document, it's too complex to explain. So here's the flow that GitLab needs also to know from which URL he should redirect, is allowed to redirect back. And that would be our Dex instance. So that's the reason why we need to add this here. So it would be something like HTTPS Dex, and then callback that Dex knows that was triggered. Mostly we need to configure. That means that the secret will be also kept to the page. When you are using single page applications on OAuth, it's considered that you use non-confidential credentials, that you should disable it because the secret will be injected into the client, so everyone could read the secret. So it makes no sense with it. It's like more of security of, yeah. So the most important steps that you need to do is that you need to grant two scopes. It's first of all read user, so that we get all the information of our users that want to log in, and also that we are able to give permissions based on OpenID. So that would be the two steps that are needed to create the application. I created this already, so when you're looking this into the final stuff, you can see here the application ID, the secret. I will invalidate it afterwards, so you don't need to keep it in mind. And you see that I read this two stuff. So when we are looking back into our application, you can see the client ID is literally the same. So it starts with 9.2, and the client secret is here with 3.7. Yeah, so that means what does happen is in the end, so that GitLab or Dex mostly will connect to check. Oh, can I hide it? I don't check it. So Dex will crawl to gitlab.com and afterwards asking for the right permissions. So mostly what we also say directly, we want, because Dex will only allow only users from group everyone can contribute. So what does it mean? We can use also define groups. So which groups are allowed on GitLab to log in later, or can get a valid authentication token, and currently only users from the everyone can contribute group are allowed to do that. So that means only users from everyone can contribute can probably later authenticate against the cluster. That's really cool. Yeah. In the end, what we did then afterwards, we need to configure also a client. So because currently our API server will talk to DAX, but also probably when you remember on that part, we will use the kubectl, and the kubectl will talk to the kube API server, and that's the reason why we need to define a client how kubectl can connect to DAX. We will come to the point a little bit later and deeper, but it's only for your mentioning that you saw it. That's it. So that was the configuration of DAX mostly. And now we can hopefully spin up our cluster again and see that everything is working. So for that, what we now need to do is we need to configure first of all the API server. And then afterwards, we need to configure our kubectl to use the password. So that means like that we have the credentials of the user. Yeah. So for that, we're gonna we can start a little bit. So it means we going back again. I will check first of all instances are capable. So when you remember back, we did Ansible. So I set it up also Ansible here locally. I spin up new fresh machines that Max provided last time. I used the same book. I want only to check first of all if the instance is available, and you can see the instance available. And probably I figured out a bug, hopefully, or not hopefully, but sadly that I see that you can also see the Dockers, but it's another problem that we need to figure out why. Yeah. So then what we would start now is that we create all the servers directly. So that means we can provision all the servers slowly. So I don't want to set up SSH keys again. I will use only the local stuff for that because Max already provided my SSH key to the machine, so I don't need to do that again. Now we will wait a little bit, and then afterwards we should have the server configured. Yeah. So, but in the meantime, we could do something else. So I did a small change. You can also see already my pull request that I prepared for today. And that means now, as I said, we need to configure the Kube API server to speak to DAX. And that's now we will look how does it work. So as you remember probably from the last time where we tried to configure it, I set it up multiple arguments in it. And for that reason, I checked the Ansible role, how does it work, and also try directly include it into this. So that means like, okay, now the API server knows onto which DAX instance he needs to call at least. So that means we have 3 items that we need to look at. So first of all, the issue URL, that means like the instance that we have for DAX, then probably which username claim we use. We will use the email as username. Probably later can change this as well. And also which clients are allowed to connect. So it's more like the Kube client ID. Yeah. And probably also where we get the group information from, and also if someone needs to be prefixed with a name. Yeah. So there's a prefix for the groups and also a prefix for the OpenID Connect stuff. So that's it mostly. So that's really the hard part was to set up mostly, I would say, the data stuff, but now it's more straightforward. Yeah. So let's look into our Ansible stuff again. I hopefully he's currently now starting all the stuff. And we will see. Take some time. Probably are there some questions around in the meantime?
I think everyone is just waiting for getting it deployed and seeing it fixed.
Yeah,
no, I think also till now everything is clear for me at least.
Yeah, I think the illustrations you're using are really good. So I took some screenshots for Twitter already, but I was wondering, do we have this publicly shared or linked somewhere?
I can send you the link. Yeah, I think it's public reachable. Anyone with the link can view. I will send it directly.
That would be awesome. So I can just share it and link it in the blog post I'm writing in parallel.
Yeah. No, I don't see the chat right. That's for some stuff. Where's the chat? Oh.
Yeah, either paste it in Discord or a Twitter DM or yeah, whatever. Or the Zoom chat. This also works.
Yeah, I figured out where the Zoom chat is.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're screen sharing, you need to kind of find the right hidden.
Probably I need a second screen, but that's another problem, right? Not everyone can have two screens. Or my MacBook needs to have a higher resolution that I can split at least. But then you can't see it on when we're recording all the stuff. Yeah. Okay, cool. So we're getting now the token, for instance, will be prepared. I think it will take only 2 more minutes. And then we are ready to go.
I have maybe one question. Did we install something for OpenID, or do we just have to enable it on the API server?
We need only, it's currently, it's a good question probably. So when we are getting back into Kubernetes, authentication methods, I think, authentication. So currently, OpenID is a built-in strategy. So that means that you don't need to extend it. And OpenID Connect, it's like not, we're talking about OpenID, the right term would be OpenID Connect. And OpenID Connect is a standard. So you can probably use every provider that supports OpenID Connect. So you can also use, for example, Gitlab as authentication provider. There are a lot of more systems that support it. So it's a built-in strategy. So we have V5 built-in 5. Last time, if you remember, we used the X509 certs to do that. But there we have a problem with the revocation of the user. That's not cool. You can also use static token files or bootstrap tokens, also service accounts, but that's more a pain of managing. And OpenID is the normal standard that you use in every provider. So it's like if you're going to manage Kubernetes services like EKS, RKS, also EKS Elastic Kubernetes Service, Azure Kubernetes Service, and GKE, Google Kubernetes Engine, they are all supporting OpenID Connect out of the box, and you can connect with your local AWS, Azure, or Google account to that. Another option that is also really cool is that you can also use web token authentication. So that means that you can write your own authentication provider on that if you want to do that. But mostly, I wouldn't recommend to do that at all. Use a standard, because then you don't have problems to find more people to onboard on this stuff, and probably you have a bigger community to get support when something is not working, in terms of instead of reinventing the whole wheel again. So that's cool.
Okay, thanks. And now I'm jealous that the sun is shining in your face, but that's another issue.
I could fix it, but then I'm sitting in the dark. It's not cool. It's light with glory shine. Yeah, so let's look back. Yeah, we have a server. Probably I have also the it's timing out. No.
Do we need more resources?
No, it's not the resources. Max Ansible script doesn't fetch the new kubeconfig if it exists locally on my file system. So then.
So we're doing another session of live debugging and live fixing.
No. Okay, so let's try again. We are a little bit.
I think you can add a tag for the kubeconfig only, so it's faster. To get only the kube. Yes, I think he
I didn't check
there's
this.
I think there's one tag for the kubeconfig.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Does RM delete it from the environment because you've exported the variable into the environment?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, but RM does delete the file and not the unset the variable.
We can.
Okay, no, never mind.
I think it works, but we will see.
I was just confused by the commands.
I think he deleted the kubeconfig.
Yeah. That was what I intended to do. So because I did under the variable, I did the path of the kubeconfig, and then it's deleted. It's a little bit slow today.
Yeah, but you only use the raw string and not a dollar leading the variable name. So I was curious what you're trying to do.
Okay, but okay. You see, it works now. Probably what I did is because remove contains.
Sorry, I didn't see the leading dollar.
Okay.
It's been a long day. Too little coffee. Okay.
So hopefully now everything gets fine. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Now we can get to our nodes. You can see literally. There's not a command like who am I, right? That I can see who I am from terminal, right? Yeah, okay. So now probably I'm cluster admin as a jumping because when we are checking our let's open it again. So right now we're getting the first instance of our users. So literally we are now also the cluster admin. It's on its third base. And now we want to log in with our user. And now we're coming to an interesting point because the server has the configuration on it. Right, we can check it. No, that's not the link that I want to have. And it's fine. One is missing, right? Okay. So the only stuff that we did on, I don't have it. Oh. It is not. I want to get the head messages from the John message here. Let me check. So on some part, you can't see it right now. It's not true. Because I want to check if you can. the KubeIDA server doesn't report anything if everything is working. So it means like when the DEX connection works. If you remember on the last time we checked here the logs and we see, okay, the kubelet doesn't work at all and so on. And you can now see there's currently no errors in there. But when we are checking the systemd file also, you can see I added all the commands from Ansible out to here now, and now the Kube API server knows that he needs to connect to our instance. So, but now we want to connect with our local user to that. So, okay, let's do it. For that part, we need to do a little bit more different way. So, as you remember last time, we set up the user and so on. And for that, we need also to configure our kubectl again, and to set up the credentials for our new user. In my case, it would be my name. And also what we need for that, because we are using OpenID and kubectl doesn't support OpenID directly out of the box, because we need to fetch with kubectl the token and so on, there's a plugin. A plugin, it's called kubelogin, where it's what it really does, it does for us the whole OpenID flow. So it means like he will open locally our instance to GitLab, and we can log in, and then we are authenticated. Get authenticated means that we get the token back, and then we can use it against the nodes to get all this stuff. Yeah. So that's more. I think he has also a diagram on it. Let's see, higher level view. Yeah, mostly I would say we would start first with executing it, and then I explain the whole diagram flow, how the flow of the login goes, and so on. So I think it's more clear afterwards, instead of explain first the diagram. So for that reason, we need to configure our kubectl to use our credentials. I put this in a separate command line. So what we now need to do is like, as you remember, now we need to set up, we use this plugin. I installed it already. It was installed after the recommendation of the developer. So that means when you're going down to the site, I only installed, you can install directly via Homebrew. I use True mostly on my daily base, so that was the reason why I did this. We could also copy over commands from here. It would be a little bit more way. So, but I decided to go with the one command so that we only need to execute it, and then we are ready to go. So for that reason, we would use this command right now. I hope so. Here's complete everything. Cool. And now we will see some changes, hopefully. Okay, that's cool. So now we configured our OpenID client. So let's look back into the kubeconfig stuff. So what you can now see here is like that we configured only the user. We didn't configure it now in new context. This could be also done later, but that's the steps that we only did. So mostly here we've seen the client secret from DEX that we know, the extra crops that we want to get. Probably we need to change it there. Okay, and the client ID and so on. And probably what it does, kubectl now what it really does is, hey, when we are calling the user Niklas, from command line, it will do, it's like a hook mostly. Based on execution, it will call the OpenID login plugin and executes the command that token. So when we are looking back, I hopefully can see. It's in another binary path. I didn't have it directly in my binary path. So to show it to you, let me think. Okay, it's fine. We do it afterwards. So now, for example, I want to get secrets with our new user. And for that, we can specify in the kubectl the user command, and this will use literally our user Niklas. And now what happens is, hey, it opens automatically a website. So this, as you remember, this is the DEX IDP. So first, we now can log on DEX because kubectl doesn't know that we want to connect with GitLab. kubectl knows only we want to connect with DEX as OpenID provider, and also the kube API server knows only to log in with DEX. But we want now to log in with GitLab. So for that reason, we can now click in on login with GitLab. And now we see authenticated. Hey, that's true. And now probably what you can now see here is when I now try to get the secret, is that the user is not anymore the standard cluster admin user. I don't have access to that. So when I type the normal secret commands, it works. So, but when I use my hidden user command, it's like that it doesn't allow to do any commands. Yeah, and probably you ask, why does this happen? So first of all, OIDC, where does it come from? This comes from the configuration from the kube API server. When we are looking back, you can see that we defined, I will open the raw, it's better to read. Right. So the username is prefixed with OIDC. This is the part that we currently can see here. And now it's used the username. You're asking why it's not the username, so why it's not Solid Nerd, or why it's not Niklas, what's this email? And this comes from because we are requesting a different scope. So currently we are requesting as username using the email. So it's like, okay, OpenID knows only that we're using the email right now. So that's the reason why our username is oidc-hi@solidnerd.dev. So luckily now everyone who has the kubeconfig can connect to this cluster and use this command to log in, and who is in the everyone contribute group is authenticated. So the next step would be now to give access again. So for example, doing some airbag stuff so that these users has a role binding. So probably we can do this fastly. Target cluster role binding. Because it probably can copy me someone.
So we can actually apply the knowledge we learned 2 sessions ago?
Yeah. Or also in beside, because this is the basic, it's not like, it's the basic concept how you manage now access and authentication. So first we have the authentication part. This was done with OpenID now. And now we are giving the user cluster admin. So it's like that we have access to everything. The cluster role binding. I will patch this directly instead of creating a new one, but we probably could also create everyone can contribute cluster. So for that, I hope so. Can I copy it? Where am I? Okay. Huh?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, because for me this is a great learning curve, connecting the dots.
Yeah. It was also tricky for me when I get started into this topic, because I didn't know so much about OpenID, and currently now I think all modern apps, or if you are, we need probably to figure out something else. So now we need to specify our user, and the name was, I think, OIDC hi@solidnerd.dev. And so now when we are asking for secrets, you see also secret is working. And that's the connecting dots, what we did now. So to recap this a little bit, we have also probably, as I remember on the part that I drew last time, So literally what we did now is we had here the cluster role. It was called cluster admin. And we gave this to this user literally.
I think someone in your background makes
Yeah.
schnitzel all day long.
No, it's the construction site worker. Wait, I will fix it. I will close the window. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, maybe offer him a coffee or something like that. Ask him to join the session and do some Kubernetes stuff.
Yeah, that would be true, but the problem is that my Spain is not so fluent. That's the only challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's continue learning.
Okay. And this is what we now did. So we gave the user OpenID OIDC high node dev with a cluster row binding. It was also called cluster admin, I think. The permission to do that. Yeah, I hope so. It's not so loud because I can also hear it again. But I can probably shout and trying to yell in Spain a little bit.
No, it's fine.
Okay. Yeah,
I think everyone has access to the mirror board now and to everything else afterwards to follow up.
Yeah, mostly I will also probably copy the commands from here so I can share the hack MD that I created, or also going into the stuff that we will see.
Yeah, well, I will assign you the draft merge request for the blog post after the session, so you can just go ahead and edit.
Yeah, and now, probably you're asking now the question, how does this kubectl magic does work? So this is the last missing piece that we are currently running on. So when we need to look a little bit here on this flow diagram. So as you remember, when we are going back into the logs, let me check where it was. Yeah, you can see. Okay. As you see, as we configured this stuff, so nothing happened. So a browser doesn't open. It was like, okay, it doesn't. We will see how does it work. And what really happens was that when we are executing the first command, so for example, kubectl get secret, and when we are looking back into this, what does it flows is that first kubectl triggers now kube login, and kube login opens a browser directly. So that means like, hey, please authenticate the human user. So it's like this user that we have right now. So I need to have, no, I didn't. Yeah, okay. I open this slowly, and the user gets authenticated because I think the numbers are not correct. Okay, it's fine. So literally the browser opens, and probably I have opened the window. Yeah, true. Currently now we have a session. I need to check where the session is. Probably then we can also look into the token. But for right now, it's like the case, okay, we open the browser. Now we authenticate against DAGs, and for that we're using our Gitlab prerequisite. So that's like that we get this. So afterwards, we have authenticated successfully on DAGs with our Gitlab IDP. A token will be responded to the local client to kube login. And then we are starting in the process of the kubectl gets the token with the final request. And the kube API server only controls if the token is valid, mostly. It doesn't do any, like, if I have directly permissions on the topic or something like that. It does only checks if it's valid. And how does it work so it's valid? The whole token, how does it look like? They use a standard, it's called JPT or JOT mostly in base. And now we need to let's check if we can find something about this, because I'm also curious about how does it work as in memory. Let me check how to start in the stuff. Let me check something if he has probably we can do that. No. Let's shortly fix hopefully our config.
Copy paste from Stack Overflow.
No, we copy paste from need to check from directly from hopefully that I need to load in there. Yeah, true, it works. True. True. And now we can open it. Cool. And wait, we will make it a little bit better to read for everyone. Okay. So.
Yeah, you need to cut pipe. I think, yeah.
And you can see here, this is for final token. This is for final token that DEX provided us with the information. And now we are a little bit lazy because I want to get only the ID token. Okay, now I'm more lazy because I don't have strings in it. Yeah, and I now copy paste it so that I don't need to do that. And now when we are looking into this token, you can, because it's a JOT token, you can see all the information. So what's currently in there. So you can see, okay, who's the issuer? It's like our DEX instance, which client was used. It's the login client that was we declared before. Which email we used is like a higher sort nerd, and currently we have the information in which groups we are. So currently we are also allowed to, for example, what we could also do is when we are looking into this token part is everyone can contribute. So that means when we are checking back the cluster admin stuff. And for example, we would don't allow only one user all access to everything. So first I check if this works. Again, secret. So it says, okay, I'm not allowed to do that, but now let's add a group to that. So probably because hopefully my user is in the OpenID contribute group. Oh, he doesn't save my notes. So no, I don't see my. And it was called OIDC. Now everyone. Yeah, and as you see, for example, now when we using instead of only the username, we can also define a group. So it's like probably when we would say, okay, someone from only the other users from everyone can contribute to are allowed to do that. And we're checking the permissions again. It says, hey, it doesn't work. Why? because when we are looking in our token, it's only everyone can contribute allowed. And that's how you can now define all the processes on giving a cluster access to everyone. You have also the option in Dex to allow every group, but for example, if you want to fill it, like, because we're using a public instance of GitLab, so it's not our internal everyone can contribute instance, it's probably cool to have only a group name there. Probably what needs to be fixed that I see is that I also want to have the email scope, so the username scope, because when we are looking into GitLab IDP, there's a good documentation about it on the GitLab documentation, which information are shared and which information you can get, at least. So I'm really I didn't figure out how to do that, but I'm really interested to get the nickname also, so that we can have only the GitLab username in the cluster instead of using our email addresses. Because sometimes people could have multiple email addresses in one account. No, it's not possible. It depends on the system a little bit. If you have unique usernames or unique email addresses. Yeah. But that would be another story. Like, I can report at least or write in a blog post how to do that. And yeah, that's it mostly about all the OpenID stuff right now. Now we are a little bit, I thought I would be a little bit faster.
You can continue. I was just thinking about JOT or JWT, because this was part of the AWS user group last week on Monday I attended. And there is a feature request for adding more JOT attributes somewhere. This is not directly related what you did now, but it's interesting to debug, to decode it, and also use the attributes for granting access to specific resources then.
Yeah. It's like currently in our company, we use this also. So to decide who has which roles and which access, we're using an own IDP. And for that, we also provide information about the users. Probably, as I mentioned, if you're looking into the newer cluster setups, for example, of EKS, there's also now the possibility to do this with JOT tokens, and they use the same concept. So it's like, because you're using OpenID and Kubernetes has an open identity provider and then you can plug in. That's really cool. So it's like that you have now multiple options to do the authentication part, and you need only to speak one protocol and not, hey, I'm currently the provider X, I speak my own protocol, and I'm provider Y, and I speak my another protocol. And you need to figure out on your end how to connect all this stuff. And it's like a standard. It's mostly based on all that stuff. Yeah, yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, but I will try to figure out where the issue is. And maybe we can do another session or maybe a follow-up on how to extract specific details.
Yeah, mostly we could. Yeah, and of course we need to do the kiosk stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we are.
We're a little bit.
We are at time basically. Okay, next week is the 24th. Who wants to do something for next week? Or should we follow up with Kiosk next week? Does it make sense?
Philip, if you want to speak something, you're muted.
No.
Yeah, then I'm in. Probably can do the kiosk stuff, because I mentioned that we would to do it today. But then we have now the stuff. Okay, how does it work? Literally, I can probably share my screen again, only for 2 seconds.
Yeah, just give a forecast what we want to do, and what we did today, and then I think we're good to go to close the session.
Yeah, mostly what we now want to do, now we have users in our system. Now we want probably so that every user can work in this cluster, but on a really efficient base. So that means in the end that we need to manage our users so that they have limits, so that they can't use all resources in our clusters, and probably want also to see how many resources are used. And that's mostly based on a multi-tenant system, so that multiple users in there have their own shared resources. If you're thinking about multi-tenant systems, you can look like a high tower or something like that, where every apartment has its own settings, but it's like one system, one building only, and this is our current cluster. And now we will add to our cluster independent departments or apartments at least, where we will create all the resources. So it's like the account stuff, the row bindings, everything will be then done by Kiosk literally, and we will integrate this so that we have a full cluster overview, or full cluster user and role management literally out of the box. Because this one part is mostly missing on a lot of people. People mostly intending to start with cluster admin, and then it's like I saw in a lot of companies that in a lot of companies they have only one account and everyone uses cluster admin on the same account. It's like if you give someone access via SSH with the root account, and everyone uses the same root account. So it makes no sense. So you can't auditing it, and this hard part on security related stuff. So what we did today now is like, we mastered finally the OpenID stuff. We integrated this in our Kubernetes. And we connected in the end our own user that comes from OpenID to the cluster role admin. Yeah. So that he has also access. And in the next week, we will do the authentication part then with Kiosk. Yeah, that will be for next week.
And probably we can try things a little bit more live without much preparation, as you like. I don't know how complicated this is to install, but probably it will be interesting to see you to learn what it does, how it behaves, and so on.
Yeah, mostly we could what we could do in the end is what Max started on this stuff is like that we have basic cluster services or all services that should come into the cluster. Wait, that's okay. So it's now better. You should say it me before. That we have at least the base service that we need to work on our cluster platform, because it's a platform and we want to develop apps on it, and we don't want to invent every time the wheel on setting up an ingress controller or setting up DNS or setting up TLS certificates and also user management. So these are our base services, and probably we want to deploy them all at once. So when we spin up a new cluster, everything should configure that everyone can use it from everyone can contribute to. So that could be the main target on that. Of the goal of the vision.
Yeah, and I think when we come to the point where we want to either add it to CI/CD or ISC or GitOps, which was mentioned earlier, this also involves adding, for example, Prometheus or a different sidecar for monitoring into the cluster, and we can like iterate on that and build the base system and then add new features to it, but without reinventing the wheel, as you said, and like learning YAML all the time, just going ahead.
Yeah,
I think it's great.
Cool benefit that we get today is that we don't need to share our kubeconfig at all, mostly. So everyone gets his personal login into the system.
Yeah, and only since we already use the resources for our group and have the permissions there.
Yeah. Probably we could also find out how to automatically convert it a little bit, so that we see, okay, who is currently in the group in GitLab, who has developer rights, probably that we can also derive from the permissions, but I'm quite not sure if it's possible.
I need to check if it. But to be honest, the roles are like Yeah, they are not really like split up in a specific sense. It just made sense who is a regular attendee or regular member getting maintainer access. The founders got owner access, and everyone else gets developer access. We could play around with that. It would be interesting for others to learn if we can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Mostly, it would need to see if it's capable to do to get in subgroups. So then it would be feasible to do that for a protocol layer.
That sounds also like an interesting idea. Just as an advertisement, in 4 weeks, we will welcome Sebastian Pahl from Obstrace about observability. So this is basically, I don't know how far we get there, but like we're going with Kubernetes, and we are now adding so everything which is needed, touching base with monitoring and observability at some point. And I'm also in touch with Alex Jones about auto DevOps and Kubernetes and observability as well. So we can continue the journey and like make 2021 like we learn Kubernetes together year, basically. Yeah, and try to build something which others can use and others can also try out or use in production. We use it in production, actually. One thing we probably should do when we find a certain point in the storyline, I think this is the 7th session now, to write a summary blog post, or maybe not a blog post, continue working on the handbook and create one for saying, hey, this is the Kubernetes setup exercise we're doing, or keep extending the README, I don't know. Just thinking out loud that someone doesn't have to watch 10 hours of videos now, or read lots of blog posts, but instead following a series of quick how-tos or quick things.
Recipes, or we could build. Everyone can contribute playbook. Or we create all this stuff.
For example, my Ansible knowledge is very limited, so.
No, playbook on documentation part. It's like not creating Ansible stuff. It's like, hey, a playbook is like, okay, a documentation where you see, okay, all the steps and what goes up and down. Mostly we run it all in our internal company for our engineers, so that everyone knows how the stuff is working or can execute it.
I don't know how much effort we need to put into that, but it would be certainly a goal to provide some sort of self-practice or self-education training things, and explore how far we want to go. I think the most interesting part is basically using the demo repository and which commands are needed to bring the Hetzner cluster into your own group or namespace. I think this would be interesting. But before going there, I would totally love to like build new things and try out like CI/CD deployments, applications, and other things, because I have the feeling that we're learning a lot, and you're learning from my dumb questions sometimes. Yeah, and I think I said it before, I'm learning more than any Udemy courseware could provide me, because I don't have time to watch 10 hours of video.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. Anything else for today which you want to share, or maybe let's just wrap it up and say thanks for watching, everyone. We're looking forward to meeting you next week, same time, same date, like 9 a.m. PT or 6 p.m. Central. Or is it not? No, it's not 9 a.m. PT. It's 10 a.m. PST, because in the US there's daylight saving. And for us, it's 6 p.m. in our time zone, in Central Europe time. Okay. Okay, that's enough for time zones. It's complicated. I wish everyone a pleasant day or a pleasant evening, depending on the time zone, and see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.